An Isle of Wight ferry carrying more than 50 passengers caught fire in the Solent this morning. Nobody was injured and the fire was put out, but the Wightlink vessel sailing from Portsmouth was evacuated when it arrived in Fishbourne. Well, Alan Sinclair is live for us in Portsmouth now. Alan, what more can you tell us?
Well, the company aren't certain at this stage, Tom, and investigation's underway, of course, but they believe that the fire broke out in an air conditioning unit on the deck of the ship. Now, Wightlink are describing this as a small fire, but we've got some images taken by a passenger who was on board at the time, and I think you can see it looks fairly dramatic. Ferry staff clearly rushing to deal with an emergency. You can see a lot of flame, thick black smoke. The ferry was midway across the Solent at the time, so visible to thousands on the mainland and on the island. And so, as you'd imagine, the sight of that smoke causing real alarm for a time. But the company is saying it looked far more serious than it actually was, and that their staff on board are trained to deal with situations like this.
The incident broke out and was dealt with by the crew that are trained to deal with these scenarios. And passengers were taken care of in the lounge areas. The situation was dealt with very quickly and the vessel was berthed and disembarked the passengers and vehicles normally.
So what happens next, Alan?
Well, Tom, this vessel, it's called St Faith, is currently alongside the ferry terminal at Fishbourne on the island. As you'd imagine, the emergency services on the island and the Coast Guard were scrambled, but all of the passengers and the staff disembarked very safely. It's fortunate that this happened at a very quiet time, a quiet crossing, and also a quiet time of year for Wightlink. There were only 52 passengers on board at the time, 13 members of staff. Nobody was injured, and Wightlink are very keen to point out that their timetable is already back to normal.
Alan, thank you.
Hello, welcome to South Today. I'm Sally Taylor. In tonight's programme, a blaze on the Solent. An Isle of Wight ferry catches fire with 52 people on board.
A chap just a few feet from me said, it's a bit weird, the ferry seems to be on fire. I said, no, you're joking. It started quite small, but within seconds, it suddenly got quite big and quite frightening.
An Isle of Wight ferry carrying more than 50 passengers caught fire in the Solent this morning. Nobody was injured and the fire was put out. But the Wightlink vessel sailing from Portsmouth was evacuated when it arrived in Fishbourne. Alan Sinclair's been following the story. Let's join him now in Portsmouth. Alan, do we know what happened yet?
Well, Sally, it's here behind me, parked up and going nowhere for a while. The fire broke out, as we understand it, on the upper deck on the far side of the boat in what's thought to be an air conditioning unit. Now, that sent clouds of black smoke up into what was a very clear blue sky. This incident was visible from many miles away. Thousands of people saw it. Wightlink described this as a small fire. It certainly looked pretty dramatic. These images show the intensity of the flames and the urgency of staff trying to deal with the emergency aboard a ferry halfway across the Solent heading from Portsmouth toward Fishbourne. Witnesses on dry land could only imagine what was happening as black smoke billowed into a cloudless sky. The fire was in an area not accessible to passengers, but as these images show, still worryingly close.
I didn't see it actually start soon after, and it was quite a small fire. And then within just a few seconds, there was 18 feet flames and huge black billowing smoke going straight up into the air.
The Coast Guard took a number of calls but had already been alerted by the ferry crew itself and told that the fire had been contained by staff on board. Lifeboats were scrambled and the Isle of Wight Fire Service called to the ferry port as a precaution.
Well, it was just really gathering the information initially and just ascertaining that the vessel was content with this situation. We monitored that situation really closely and we were prepared to react should it all go wrong. Potentially it could have been worse. Absolutely, but we prepare for this type of incident. We work closely with ferry companies and this incident went like clockwork.
As the St Faith pulled into Fishbourne, Wightlink was already playing down the significance of what had happened.
The incident broke out and was dealt with by the crew that are trained to deal with these scenarios, and passengers were taken care of in the lounge areas. The The situation was dealt with very quickly and the vessel was berthed and disembarked the passengers and vehicles normally.
St Faith is now back in Portsmouth and an investigation underway, but there's a very real sense of relief because this could have been far more serious. Sally, one other thing worth noting, this was a quiet crossing at a quiet time of year for Wightlink. Only 52 passengers on board, 13 members of staff. Of course, nobody injured. Wightlink have apologised for any alarm caused to those passengers, but they've been quick to stress that they were back on their normal timetable by lunchtime.
Alan, thanks very much. The Conservatives